Okay, good evening to all of you. Magandang gabi sa lahat. And to those who are in Italy, like Father Andrew, buonasera a tutti voi.
Buonasera.
This evening, we are many inside the big room of the Zoom. And there are also those who are following directly via the New City FB page live, also other FB pages. Welcome to each one of you to this fourth edition of New City Kumustahan. Perhaps just a short background about the New City Kumustahan. We started doing this online conversation at the start of the lockdown. It is an online space to get connected with all the New City friends here and abroad. The very purpose is for New City to continue providing cultural formation even amidst the pandemic. And through the feedbacks we are getting, this online space of New City has been very much appreciated. And this is the reason why we have this fourth edition today. This time, we have a very well-known personality who will be giving us input, a glimpse of the recently released encyclical of Pope Francis, the Fratelli Tutti. But some of our New City friends do not know Father Andrew, so allow me to say something about him briefly. He is currently the spiritual director of Pontificio Collegio Filipino and a professor at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome in the Faculty of Missiology. He is also currently involved with the preparations for the 500 years of Christianity, particularly the International Missiology Forum and National Mission Congress in 2022. He holds a doctorate in missiology from PUG and an MA in theology in Tagaytay City and an MBA in Ateneo de Naga. Among his publications is a book titled God's Global Household. Included in these 3 finalists and circle of winners of the National Book Award in 2008 and Manila Critics Circle for Best Books in Theology. He was the past president of the International Association of Catholic Missiologists, IACM, from 2009 until 2017. Also, a former parish priest of the Peña Francia Shrine in Naga City, and the mission director of the Archdiocese of Cáceres from 2002 to 2012. Friends, welcome. Let's welcome Father Andrew Recepcion.
So thank you, Rome, for this wonderful opportunity to see all of you, to be one with all of you, and also for the opportunity to share something on the third encyclical of Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti. But first of all, I would like to invite all of you to support New City Press Philippines. And please, if you have the opportunity, buy all the publications of New City Press, subscribe to New City Magazine online. They have also migrated to digital platforms, and support New City in many ways that you can. And if you want to help, please contact the Managing Director, Rome Vital, who has just introduced me. So thank you very much for allowing me to do this and to share with you some insights on the third encyclical of Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti. Obviously, I will not be able to tell many things about this encyclical given the time that we have, but I will try to give you an overview and some salient points that we need to remember when we talk about, when we read the encyclical Fratelli Tutti. Of course, we cannot replace the value of reading the encyclical yourself, no? And I would like to highlight that. So let me begin by sharing with you an overview of the encyclical, the background or the context, the inspiration behind the encyclical, the optic of the Pope, and also the editorial work, and then we'll go to the content, and we'll wrap up with 3 points of view with regard to the encyclical on the value of fraternity from Pope Francis, St. Francis of Assisi himself, and also, as many of you belong to the Focolare movement, also Chiara Lubick. So we will wrap up with that, and we will leave a space for questions, sharing, or insights that can come from all of you. So let me begin by saying that Fratelli Tutti was a document signed on the 3rd of October 2020 by Pope Francis on the occasion of the Pope's visit to the tomb of his namesake, St. Francis of Assisi. And of course, the text was officially published after it was signed the next day after, which is the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. Now, it's interesting to note that when Pope Francis was elected as a pope, he was seated beside a cardinal. He didn't know yet what name he had to take as a pope. Of course, when they enter the conclave, it's not that they already think about their name as a pope. But one of the cardinals seated close to him told him when he was elected, "Do not forget the poor." So with that reminder from a cardinal seated beside him, Pope Francis was inspired to take the name Francis, for his as his name, new name, I should say, as a pope. So let's go to the context, the background of this third encyclical of Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti. It's important to highlight that the title itself was actually very controversial, Fratelli Tutti. And many groups, including a priest, criticized the Pope for using the title Fratelli Tutti. And some women groups also, because they were saying that the title is not inclusive. In English, brothers all is not an inclusive language. But we have to understand that Pope Francis did not want to change the actual expression of Saint Francis of Assisi himself, because this title is taken from the Ammonizioni, or the admonitions of Saint Francis. And let me read to you the Italian text so you will understand Fratelli Tutti, though some people said that Saint Francis of Assisi used the Latin text in his admonition. So it says here, and I quote from the 6th book of the admonitions, number 1, "Guardiamo con attenzione, fratelli tutti, il buon pastore che per salvare le sue pecore sostenne la passione della croce." So here there is that expression, fratelli tutti, and Pope Francis did not want to change that because it's something historical and it is rooted in the very writings of Saint Francis himself. So, well, the exact English translation is, "Let all of us, brothers, look to the good shepherd who suffered the passion of the cross to save his sheep." So I think that's very important and to highlight. But early on the 14th of May 2020, when Pope Francis celebrated Mass in the chapel of St. Martha in the Vatican City, Pope Francis already alluded to this quotation of St. Francis. And I read part of his homily. Pope Francis says, "We are all brothers and sisters. St. Francis of Assisi used to say, all brothers and sisters." And so men and women of every religious confession are uniting themselves today in prayer and penance to ask for the grace of healing from this pandemic. So in the context of the pandemic, Pope Francis had this intuition about the role of being brothers and sisters to one another. By the way, in the Italian language, when you say fratelli, it also includes sorelle, no? the sisters. So it means all of humanity. So in a way, it's also an inclusive language. Another important point in the introduction of Fratelli Tutti, the third encyclical of the Pope, we find a quotation that's very important with regard to our neighbors. And he quotes again St. Francis of Assisi in the 25th book of his admonitions, which says that blessed is the servant who would love and respect his brother as much as when he is far from him, as he would when he is with him. So that's also very important in the spirit of the encyclical. It's all about this being neighbors, being brothers and sisters to one another. Let's go to the next point here, which is the inspiration behind the encyclical. Now, the title of the encyclical, especially the context of its publication and the patronage of St. Francis of Assisi as a pioneer of interreligious dialogue, have been important in the encyclical. We have to understand that Pope Francis, in a special way, highlights also in the context of the pandemic the need for the world to reflect in a new way on the meaning of what it means to be brothers and sisters as one big family of God. So in the encyclical, the inspiration is that on February 2019, the Pope met in Abu Dhabi Ahmad Talat Al-Tayyib, the Grand Imam of Al-Ashar, during which he signed a document on human fraternity. But also, besides Francis of Assisi, and in fact, when it was signed, this meeting of the Poverello, St. Francis of Assisi, with this anniversary on the meeting between St. Francis and the Sultan Malik al-Kamil in Egypt during the Crusades on the occasion of the 800th anniversary of the event in which the Pope signed this document, we can say that it was emblematic of the Pope's desire to propose in a new way to the whole world the meaning of human fraternity, of fraternity. Another important inspiration here of Pope Francis in writing the third encyclical is that he has been also inspired by numerous non-Catholic personalities who have worked for fraternity and peace. For example, Martin Luther King, Desmond Tutu, Mahatma Gandhi, Charles de Foucault. So all these personalities have also inspired Pope Francis to write about human fraternity. And in fact, towards the end of the encyclical, we will encounter again these persons as models or models to emulate when it comes to human fraternity. But another interesting inspiration behind the encyclical, for example, if you read chapter 2 on the Good Samaritan, we find that Pope Francis and some commentators have highlighted this very much in a special way, that Pope Francis also is partly inspired by the interpretation of the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur and Gabriel Marcel, for example, in which the Pope quotes twice in the encyclical. And when we go to the thoughts of these two French philosophers, basically, they are philosophers that help us understand the meaning of the other, of the neighbor. So for example, Paul Ricoeur, in his philosophy, especially in his collection in the French Histoire of Vérité, he speaks about the relationship between an associate and a neighbor. So Pope Francis borrows this idea in the second chapter of encyclical on the Good Samaritan, for example. Because as he analyzes or does an exegesis of the Good Samaritan in the 2nd chapter, Pope Francis relates it to Paul Ricoeur's idea that when we encounter the other, we either encounter the other because of his or her function or her role in society, or we encounter the other because he or she is our neighbor. Well, that's very important to note, because a neighbor is a person whom we are called to relate to, not because of his or her role, because a relationship with a neighbor is always characterized by intimacy. For example, our parents, our family, our friends. So therefore, it is characterized by our personal relationship. So that's very important in the understanding of the other and the neighbor. Gabriel Marcel, for example, that partly also inspired Pope Francis, is a French philosopher who highlights that we cannot objectify our neighbor. Every neighbor is always subject to be loved, no? Because like technology that dehumanizes, we cannot take our neighbor as an object, but always as an experience of a subject that has to be loved. So that, I think, is very important also as an inspiration to the encyclical. Now, let's proceed to the lens. How do we read the encyclical from the point of view, the framework of Pope Francis? Or we call it the interpretative framework or the reading lens that we use to read Pope Francis. I should say that reading the encyclical, the 3rd encyclical, gives us the idea that there is a continuity of the vision of Pope Francis when it comes to the missionary church. Some commentators are saying that this could be the last encyclical of Pope Francis because it completes the picture. There is what we call the triptych, no? The 3 panels. His first encyclical at the beginning of his papacy in 2013 is called Lumen Fidei, the Light of Faith. It was written during the Year of Faith that continued the work of Benedict XVI, but Pope Francis added his own reflection to what faith is all about. But that, in a special way, was also highlighted by Evangelii Gaudium. No? It is not an encyclical, but it is the longest writing of Pope Francis, encyclical in 2013, which in a way deals with our relationship with God, with the Creator. So the first panel of the encyclical is our relationship with God. Now, it was followed in 2015 by Laudato Si, or the care for our common home, and according to commentators, it is our relationship with creation. So with the Creator, with creation, and now in 2020, Pope Francis releases his 3rd encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, which reflects on our relationship with creatures. So 3 panels, if we want to call it that way, a triptych of the first panel with Creator, the second panel with creation, and now this encyclical with creatures, with our fellow human beings. So this is an optic by which we find the continuity of the thought of Pope Francis. But also, we have to highlight that Pope Francis is only one, I think the only Pope, who in his encyclicals has quoted Episcopal conferences. No? For example, he quoted the Episcopal Conference of the United States of America. Also in other instances, he quoted the Episcopal Conference of India and many others. So it's also very important to take note of that as an optic for reading the encyclical. So Pope Francis would like to be in conversation, not only with the past popes, but also with the voices from around the world, the other voices of the church. And I should say that also, it's interesting to note that he's also in dialogue with contemporary culture. For example, he quotes a Brazilian musician when it comes to the dance samba, the Brazilian samba. It's also part of the encyclical. And of course, he quotes the Pope, like Benedict XVI's social encyclical, Caritas in Veritate, and obviously quotes from the religious leaders, especially the Grand Imam Al-Tayyib, no? After that experience in Abu Dhabi when he signed, for example, the Declaration on Human Fraternity. So this is in a special way very important for us. Now let's go to the, before the last aspect of the background, obviously it's not indicated in Fratelli Tutti, but we should say that the encyclical's context is also COVID-19. In fact, many commentators say that COVID-19 has re-energized Pope Francis in a way to work for the good of humanity and with an urgent sense. No? In fact, Pope Francis, in the context of COVID-19, which is of course not explicitly indicated in the encyclical, but it serves also like a context for understanding the encyclical, that the church needs to be at the center of reshaping the post-pandemic world. And this encyclical on Fratelli Tutti is actually a proposal of the Pope. How do we live as church in this post-pandemic world? And in this pandemic world, I think we are still experiencing a pandemic. But this is very important for all of us. So let's go to the editorial work. If you want to read the original, it was not written in Italian. It was written in Spanish. So the original text of Fratelli Tutti is in Spanish, but it has been translated to Italian, English, and other languages. So, but the translation is in English is very good. So I should say that it is also quite faithful to the Spanish original text. And the work, basically the editorial work, was done by a theologian of Pope Francis when he was still the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Archbishop Victor Manuel Fernandez, who was part of the work in they call it Istisura, or the piecing to the piece together all the insights and ideas of Pope Francis. So there's a whole team here that helped Pope Francis come up with this encyclical. And of course, he was also assisted by the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development of the Vatican, and of course the Secretariat of State. So this is the first part. Let's go to the second part of our presentation this evening. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Okay. So let's go to the content of Fratelli Tutti. As I have indicated early on, there is no substitute, or we cannot replace our personal reading of the encyclical. What I'm doing here is just sort of like an appetizer, like a cocktail, if I might say, for you to give you the desire to read the encyclical and maybe buy from New City Press. I'm not sure if that's available from New City Press, the English translation and maybe the Spanish translation as well. But in any case, we have to say that the encyclical is very important because it deals with a very important theme for the future of you, for the present and the future of humanity. You know, there are 8 chapters. Of course, it is not the longest encyclical of the Pope. It's still, but and not the longest writing, like the Apostolic Exhortation Evangelii Gaudium in 2013 is the longest. But it's quite long enough. You cannot read it in 1 hour. You need some time to be able to digest the text of the encyclical. But let's go right away. What is the heart? What is the core of the encyclical? So I should say that the core of the encyclical is fraternity. The Pope is saying that the world is losing fast its sense of the oneness of the human family with the disappearance of the common good, of dialogue, of solidarity, of genuine concern for the good of the other. And in fact, in 107, number 107 of the encyclical, the Pope says, and I quote, "Only a proper sense of the worth of every person and a recognition of his or her dignity provides an adequate basic principle of social life. Unless this basic principle is upheld, there will be no future either for humanity or for the survival, either for fraternity or for the survival of humanity," unquote. So that's the heart of Fratelli Tutti. Now, the Pope wants us to go back to this basic bond that we have with one another. In fact, on a deeper sense, the Pope says that it's like a horizon, that fraternity comes from our faith. So it is not just a social document. It comes from our faith that God is the Father of all, and that He is a Father of peace, So I think for us, that's very important to remember. And let me add something to this basic perspective of the encyclical on fraternity. Pope Francis, in a way, is reacting to contemporary experience of modernity, which comes from French Revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberté, égalité, et fraternité, no? And it's interesting to note that in the mind of Pope Francis, the Western world is obsessed with the first 2 elements, which is liberty and equality. But it has been ignoring and downgrading the third, which is fraternity. Because in the mind of Pope Francis, without fraternity, liberty descends into permissiveness and avarice, a license for the powerful to possess and to exploit without fraternity. Also, Pope Francis powerfully says that without fraternity, in the whole encyclical, equality is reduced to a law of abstraction with endless squabbles over identity and a constant temptation to uniformity. So I think that's also very important for us. So in this sense, in Pope Francis, we find repeated this appeal that we don't lose sight of fraternity. Yes, we have to uphold freedom, equality, but let's not forget fraternity. But always with the gaze of faith. It's not just a simple reading of reality as it is. Now, let's continue by pointing out the content of Fratelli Tutti. And if we go, there are 8 chapters, as I have indicated. In chapter 1, we find a survey, sort of, a reading of the world today. And we have to go back to Evangelii Gaudium, or the joy of the gospel, in which Pope Francis says, reality comes before ideas. So that's very true when we read the Encyclical. The first chapter is like current reality matrix from the point of view of the Pope, what's going on in the world today. And he uses very important images to describe what's going on in the world. For example, this darkness that covers the world. So he uses darkness, light, close, open. No? So these are the images that the Pope used to describe the shifts in the way he looks at the world and its proposal and his proposal towards fraternity. So in chapter 1, for example, the Pope surveys grimly, I should say, grimly surveys a world sliding back into fragmentation. Egoism, or radical individualism. And the Pope in the Encyclical speaks even of like we become like monads. We are a world unto ourselves. I don't care about the rest outside of me. So this radical individualism and polarization, no? That creates a broader crisis of identity for the whole world. So 3 readings that are important element in contextualizing the direction of the whole text, which is fragmentation, radical individualism, and polarization. Now, we also have to understand that after chapter 1, we can group together chapters 1, 2, and 3. They can be considered as a block in reading chapters 1, 2, and 3 together. So I'm giving you a key, probably, how to read better the text. So you can put 1, 2, 3 together. And because in the first chapter, the title is Dark Clouds Over Closed World. Dark and close. The second chapter is a reflection on the Good Samaritan, a stranger on the road. And the third chapter is envisioning, engendering an open world. An open world. But if you put them all together, what the Pope is actually telling us here is that there is a pattern of conversion. We need to be converted upon reading this reality. And what is that conversion that the Pope proposes in chapters 1, 2, and 3? That we have to move from fearful, isolated, clinging to our identity or tribe or group to another kind of humanity. And what is that humanity? A humanity with compassion for the needs of all human beings. A humanity with compassion for the needs of all human beings. Human beings with the face of a foreigner, a stranger, an outsider. So, Pope Francis uses these powerful descriptions of our neighbor, foreigner, the migrant, especially in chapter 4, the stranger, the outsider. And we are invited to embrace a new kind of identity in chapters 1, 2, 3. The identity of a compassionate humanity. And that's very important in reading the content of Fratelli Tutti. Let's go to the next block, which is chapters 4, 5, 6. I put them together so you will. So now from this conversion, invitation to conversion, the Pope challenges contemporary modernity by trying to point out what contribution we can give. No, we can do this fruitful contribution to the challenges facing contemporary modernity. For example, the local and the global, the polarization there, the need of a new kind of politics that transcends neoliberalism, the urgent need for a new kind of civic dialogue that can overcome the paralysis of contemporary polarization. So there is this tension here, no? That the Pope wants to bridge, that we find in our world today in chapters 4, 5, 6. Now, also in this 3 chapters from conversion, the Pope proposes a new Christian humanism, or we call integral personalism. Sorry for these technical things, but what the Pope is trying to say here is that Francis believes in an open world, a world that embraces all. That's very important for Christian humanism, this integral personalism. In other words, we do not discard anybody simply because that person is not able to contribute anything to the world. In fact, in the chapter here, like when he talks about the migrants, one of the words, of the key words he uses is integrate. We have to integrate them. We have to facilitate that they are helped, that they become not just a minority, that they are integrated as a regular citizen of any society. So this new Christian humanism in chapters 4, 5, and 6. And Francis believes that we, as an open world that embraces all of humanity, we are called to what we call fraternal gratuitousness. No? That we are grateful that we have a brother, we have a sister. Let us not look at the other as an enemy, as a threat. Obviously, there are many reasons also to believe that kind of perspective. But we have to welcome the stranger. You have to welcome the stranger. And it's interesting to note that Pope Francis doesn't just, do slogans. He proposes very concrete ways to realize this. And in fact, one of the important insights, 5, that we find in Fratelli Tutti is that for Pope Francis, only the well-rooted can reach out to the other. That's a beautiful insight. Only the well-rooted can reach out to the other. If you don't know our identity, we cannot reach out to the other. And also, we have to respect the identity of the other because we cannot cancel it. It's part of her or his history. And that's very important. And therefore, Pope Francis, especially in number 149, for example, of the Encyclical, highlights that we have to have this healthy love for the other, a good sense of belonging to the bigger family, to the bigger human family. We are all brothers and sisters indeed in one humanity. And obviously, we can talk about chapters 7 and 8 in a special way. Chapter 7 is all about peace, harmony, war, And here, for those who study just war theory, there is something here that's a development in the doctrine of just war. Pope Francis says, quoting St. Augustine, that this particular teaching of the church is not applicable anymore to our contemporary world. Because at one point, Pope Francis was saying, now we are in a war, but on a different front, It's a kind of a war that's going on around the world, but it is not a violent war, but it's a war against the last, the least, and the lost, in a way, of those who cannot participate in the global processes of the world today. Those are marginalized, for example. In fact, he proposes even to the United Nations how they can respond to ending world hunger and so on, ending human trafficking, and proposing a new politics. Because for Pope Francis, new politics means a politics of service. a politics of service. And therefore, it's a politics that is an expression of the Catholic social teaching, which says that, we have to create in our world a civilization of love. So the highest form of charity is politics. So I hope the politicians take that seriously, no? And that's very important. And we go to the last chapter, which is chapter 8. And here, it's a very edifying chapter in a way, because it is a chapter that invites all religions, other faiths, to work together for fraternity and to reject extremism and fundamentalism and to collaborate in freedom for the world. The world faiths can open the eyes of human beings to their shared dignity and worth. So all the faiths of the world can be instruments in opening the eyes of all humanity, that we share the same dignity as human beings and we have the same worth as human beings. So therefore, it is important to remember here that we go back to the concept of the neighbor in fraternity. The Pope says, I just do not have a neighbor. Because who is my neighbor? I just do not have a neighbor. I make myself someone else's neighbor. That's very important as a shift in understanding the Fratelli Tutti, the Encyclical. I know who my neighbor is, all of us know, but the question is, do I make myself a neighbor to the other? So that's how we build fraternity. I make myself a neighbor to the other. That also is inspired by Paul Ricoeur, for example. So to move out from my comfort zones and to make myself a neighbor. And for Pope Francis, charity creates fraternity. Charity creates fraternity. Because there are many problems in our society, the social realm. But you have to be at the service of the needs of the other. And that can only be done when there is charity. So, to wrap up the content, I should say you should start with chapter 2 as a key, the Good Samaritan, and you can read better chapter 1 and 3. Then chapter 4 uses a very powerful image of the heart. We open our heart to the whole world. And then 5, 6, 7, 8 actually are very concrete proposals of the Pope on how we can create global fraternity. So let me conclude by going to St. Francis of Assisi, to Chiara Lubich, and to Pope Francis. It's quite interesting to note that I get the reflection of Padre Amedeo in a recent discussion we had. And he says that, why did the Pope go to Assisi? Because in Assisi, there is the seed of fraternity, started by St. Francis of Assisi. Now, it's interesting to note that St. Francis of Assisi did not want to call his brothers a community. He didn't want to have a prior, a superior, because he wanted everyone to be brothers. And so the Franciscans did not call themselves a community, they called themselves a fraternity, because they are all brothers. So in other words, even the superior is a brother. No? That's a fundamental insight. And that's, I think, we have to learn from St. Francis. So the seed of fraternity goes back to St. Francis, especially also within his community and in his experience when he crossed the border to meet the Sultan, Egyptian Sultan, 800 years ago. Now, if we go to Chiara Lubich, you know that Chiara Lubich was a third order Franciscan. So in her experience, there is the experience of fraternity. And Padre Amadeo says that if you look at the fraternity proposed by the Focolare movement, by Chiara Lubich in a special way, we find a new blossoming of the seed of fraternity, a new blossoming of the seed of fraternity that came from St. Francis of Assisi. But now, Pope Francis, from St. Francis of Assisi, Chiara Lubich, Pope Francis proposes fraternity as a paradigm of being church in the world today. So not just a small group, but now it becomes a proposal to the whole church to be in the at the forefront of making the whole church a church of fraternity, one big human family. So let me conclude by on a personal note. When I was a seminarian, I had the chance to stay in Tagaytay at the Mariapolis Peace. And in the chapel, there was a painting by a Vietnamese priest framed with a bamboo. And on many occasions, when we had visitors, I remember Father Victor Adjus explaining the painting. And that became almost like a refrain in my soul, which says that when you look at closely at the painting, I don't know where it went now in Tagaytay, it should be a patrimony. Yeah. When you look closely at the painting, the neighbor has no face. And the Good Samaritan also has no face. No? So the explanation is quite simple. That resonates well with the Encyclical Fratelli Tutti. Every neighbor is our brother and sister. It has no face. We do not put labels. We do not put categories, roles. Every neighbor. We have to make ourselves neighbor to everyone. And that's also the role of the Good Samaritan without being a face. So with this, I think only when we become truly protagonists in this challenge of the Pope to become a church of fraternity, that we can say that the world has changed. Maybe not in the future, but now, beginning with the ones closest to us. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Father Andrew, for that very synthetic pero puno the presentation mo, no? And then ngayon we go to the second part, to the third part rather, no? With a question and answer. And we have here some questions that came from 5 persons. I will read the question and mention the name of the person who sent it. The first one, let's begin with a question of Jenny Bulan. So this is her question. What was the frame of mind of Pope Francis that pushed him to write the encyclical?
Well, maybe I have already indicated that at the beginning, no? But let me just put it here in a nutshell. First, he wants to complete his vision of a missionary church that is in constant dialogue and encounter with the Creator, with the whole creation, and now with all creatures, with all of humanity. That's one. But the second one is it has also been occasioned by his trip to Abu Dhabi, no? With this declaration on human fraternity. And third, I think, which is equally important, is his desire that fraternity is not put aside in the discourse, in the global discourse, and that we have something to offer to the world from our faith, from the eyes of our faith. And it's a very rich experience that we have. So that's also one important element to consider when we go back to the encyclical Fratelli Tutti. And an overarching context will always be the pandemic for Pope Francis, no? Because I think for him, it is the right time to talk about fraternity in this world where we are still experiencing the pandemic, this global pandemic.
Okay, thank you for that, Father Andrew, for making us understand the frame of mind of Pope Francis in writing this encyclical. We shall now go to the second question of a millennial, Gio Francisco. The document clearly, he asked, the document clearly emphasizes the social teachings of the church. How can the local church, the parishes, act on the call of Fratelli Tutti? I mean, yes, there are ministries for social services already, but what more can be done by parishes to respond fully to the invitation of Pope Francis?
Mhm. Okay, thank you for the question, Gio. I totally agree that the encyclical Fratelli Tutti could be considered also as a social encyclical in continuity with the Catholic social teaching. In fact, there are some commentators who say that it has an echo of John the 23rd's Pacem in Terris, peace, peace to all on the earth, and also Pius XI's encyclical Quadragesimo Anno, which speaks about utopias. And in that encyclical of Pius XI, we find the importance of utopias not so much as something that cannot be realized, but utopias in Quadragesimo Anno is a critique. Utopia is a critique to the failure of systems, So back to the question of Gio, I think it's very important that we do not, all parishes should not contribute to the failure of our social systems. Look at the context of the Philippines. I want to contextualize that, no? In the field of politics, etc., in our social, in our solidarity. Are we contributing to that? Are we part of the failure of the system, or do we do something to reorient, to change the system? And that's, I think, is very important for us. So let's be realistic. Now, if in the parish you have a poor person who need your help, and you can even help that person, all this Fratelli Tutti will not have any impact at all. So we start with that. But it also, I think, millennials or the new generation, I should say, you have a lot of power in your hands to invite young people, no, to be part of this new mentality, this global consciousness of the value of the other, no, not just ako lang, all myself, all about myself, about my future, but this horizon that I exist with the other and for the other. So that's, I think, is very important as a mindset that we have to cultivate in the formation of young people. And I cannot propose now concrete ways to do it, but I think that's, in a way, what the Pope has in mind with regard to the neighbor. No? Just get that slogan, no? Not that slogan, that invitation of the Pope, that I don't only know my neighbor, no? It's not enough that I know who my neighbor is, that I make myself a neighbor. That's also very important. In whatever situation we are, in the parish, in our workplace, in the community, wherever, no? That I might make myself a neighbor. So that's the invitation of Pope Francis.
Thank you, Father Andrew. No? I'm sure Gio is very much satisfied with your answer.
Oh,
Now we have a question from Robert Samson.
yes.
What can we do concretely as a community to create a deeper awareness and understanding that we are all interconnected with each other and with God's creation according to Pope's encyclical Fratelli Tutti?
Wow, what a question. It's almost like a doctoral dissertation. Yeah, but interconnectedness, I think we go back to the Asian horizon perspective. No? And for us in Asia, harmony is a value. No? And for us to interpret interconnectedness from the Asian point of view, we're talking about harmony. Harmony with God, harmony with one another, harmony with creation. But I have to warn you that harmony doesn't mean absence of conflict, absence of disagreement, absence of, I don't know, of contrary opinions. But when you say interconnectedness here in the language of harmony, we are highlighting in a special way that what binds us together is this fundamental experience of being one family. And that's, I think, is very important for us, no? Because in the family, let's go to the context of the family. For example, children are different from one another, no? A child could be very quiet and he's always in front of his computer. The other child could be very extrovert, no, jumping all over the place, etc. But the parents will always be patient with the differences. But they'll always see that every child is unique and that no matter what happens to the child, that child belongs to the family. Put that on a larger scale with our communities, with the human family. It's very important that we contribute, you know, and the Pope in the Encyclical highlights that. Don't feel bad when what you can do is to smile. That's your contribution. I'm trying to exaggerate the idea here, but you know, you do not expect people to contribute more than what they can possibly contribute. No? Even the incapacity of the person to contribute is his contribution, is her contribution. So we are not a community of bravi, no, of the best people. Everyone in his or her uniqueness contributes to the harmony. Take away one, the whole picture is not complete. So, and I think that's very important to value each other. But the bond is dignity of each one as a human being, and also that above all, love. And I was telling the people of Switzerland early on this morning during the online conference that true love triumphs over virus. True love triumphs over virus. So I think that's very important for us, that at the end of the day, we are still one family because of the bond of love. And that Pope highlights on a social scale charity. Everything is interpreted from the optic of charity, even politics, even the way we help others. So.
Wow, thank you for this enlightening input on the interconnectedness of everything. Sabi nga sa Tagalog, di ba, ang lahat ng bagay ay magkaugnay. So,
Yeah,
thank you
Joey,
also thank you for the question sent to us by Robert Samson. Now, we have a very hot question, quote and unquote.
Okay.
You know very well how the media feasted on this in the past few weeks. The question is coming from Ting Lolasco. She asks, in the light of the recent controversy about Pope Francis's statement about civil unions, could you give us your thoughts on the inclusivity of the LGBTQ community in the encyclical Fratelli Tutti?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an extended reflection. Of course, the Pope never mentioned exactly LGBT and civil union in Fratelli Tutti, but this is now my personal opinion. I do not speak for the Pope, no, and not even attempt to, to explain the position of the Pope. But this is a personal opinion. If we get the horizon of Fratelli Tutti, the inclusion, that we embrace all of humanity, why don't we embrace LGBT? Because according to the mindset of the church, they are God's children. No? So if they have been baptized, their identity is that they are God's children. We cannot exclude them from the church. So we cannot exclude them from the church. But that's a basic dignity. But it doesn't mean that we will not also tell the truth. Do you follow here? We will not also tell the truth. But the basic disposition for all of us is that, according to Pope Francis, there is the other has the face of the stranger, the different, etc. And for us, more than before, we also have to love all people. And and I think Chiara Lubick her her proposal of the art of loving also applies here in a very special way. But back to that question, back to Fratelli Tutti and this question on the civil union. By the way, I don't want to enter into the debate, but if you read the Spanish text of the interview of the Pope, it is very clear that the Pope is saying that the Catholic Church will always uphold that marriage is only between a man and a woman. Okay, that's very clear in the teaching, and the Pope upholds that. But what he's saying is that, like the rest of humanity, every human being has a right, no? And the dignity of that human being has to be also upheld, basically as a human being. So what the Pope is trying to say is that, and as I've said, I'm not speaking for the Pope, but I'm trying to put all these streams of thoughts together. What he's trying to say is that as a community, you have to protect also these people who are often marginalized in our society. And if they're brothers and sisters to us, we also have to love them just the same. And that means also to protect them from being marginalized and to give them security also in our society. But it doesn't mean endorsing same-sex marriage. You follow? So if in an existing state, there's already a civil union agreement, we cannot how do you call that? We cannot do away with that. We have to help people find their place in society. That they do not become a minority in a way, that they are not simply marginalized. From a pastoral point of view, I should say that as priests, we also minister to all peoples, including them, including these people. No? And from a missiological point of view, you have to reach out to everyone. No? If we are a church in Oshita, we are an outgoing church. We are a church that reaches out. Even these people, we need to reach out. And I tell you, what a beautiful, there's such a beautiful experience also being with them. No? And you know that there is now a group in Manila and all over the Philippines and the world called Courage, and they help people with homosexual orientation live a faith that is really genuine and a living faith, and slowly they live a life that's really a life also faithful to the teaching of the church. So, you know, we have to have this perspective, no, and this heart that's open to all. That's, I think, what I would like to say.
Thank you very much for clarifying the position of the Pope on this issue. No? Now, we have another question that comes from Albert Tantoco. This one is something very, very concrete. I have to read, he says, I have to read the Encyclical, but have read, okay, listen and watch summaries and commentaries of Fratelli Tutti. The title sounds very much like Chiara's Love All, quote and unquote. In this regard, what does Pope Francis say about loving those on the fringes, from the personal, Trump and Duterte, to the groups like the LGBT and those in unusual heterosexual relationships like kabit, sugar daddy, or even those who live permanently with someone not their spouse? Salamat po. So, the question of Albert.
Wow, what a question. No? I should say that it's enough to read Amoris Laetitia to answer all those questions. Now, they're already in that teaching of Pope Francis on Amoris Laetitia, or the, how do you call this apostolic exhortation on family. No? But love all is a Christian imperative, not only of Chiara, but for all of us. No, Jesus actually said we have to love everyone. No, and he has shown in his life that he has loved everyone, even the Pharisees. Those who were against him, those who were not in agreement with what he was teaching. No, he loved everyone. So it is a basic evangelical lifestyle, no? A way of life that we have to embrace to love all. So regardless of who the person is, and for us, another perspective from a mystical language, I should say, is that Jesus is present in the other person, no? So therefore, for us, it is not just a wishful thinking that, you know, Jesus is in the other person. Jesus himself says that in the Gospel of Matthew, in the scene of the Last Judgment. No? Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do to me. To me, Jesus identifies himself with the other. And so, for me, that's a powerful reminder for all of us that our love has to be able to reach out to every person. But let me point out here something that probably is at the back of the mind of many people. Okay, let's love everyone. No problem with that. But what about if the person is in a situation where we know that they are living in sin? No? So, because there was a question there of people living in partnership and so on. I should repeat, who are we to judge? No? The conscience of the person, because that's the realm that's between the person and God. But what we can do is that instead of making this person be strange, there is a phenomenon now by a French Jesuit theologian who says that in the church there is a continuous estrangement of people. No? They are moving away from the structures of the church, from the parish and so on. Why? Because they don't feel loved. They don't feel welcomed. In fact, I had that personal experience one day. Somebody told me, Father, every time I go to church, I feel that I am a stranger. I was shocked. No? So I said, what can we do to help you? No? So the point, therefore, is that whoever the person is, the Pope Francis in Evangelii Gaudium says, our parishes have to be welcoming communities. No? So that when people come, they feel welcome, they feel loved, they feel valued for whatever situation they're coming from, they feel valued. But also, we have to help them slowly. And this is what we call the gradualness of the process of helping people. We cannot change people overnight. That's truth. That's reality. But if we don't start from somewhere, we will not get to any point. So you have to accompany people. So the word that the Pope loves to use most of the time is accompaniment. You have to accompany people, but you have to start from somewhere. No? And for me, that's, I think, very important when we deal with people in situations like what has been mentioned here. No? So I think that's very important for all of us. No?
Thank you very much, Father Andrew, for those enlightening answers. I am certain that they will guide us in understanding better the Fratelli Tutti, but not only, because what is most essential is to be able to put into practice the message that it brings so that all may be one, Fratelli Tutti. Now, there are still some questions that were coming in from the live audience, but we are also running out of time, no? And we just want to tell those who are following us live via the Facebook, we would like to encourage you to address the questions that you have sent. If you know Father Andrew personally, you can send them to Father Andrew, or you send them to info@newcityph.net so that we can send them directly to Father Andrew, and he will be the one, and he will answer them directly. Okay?
Oh yeah, I have my Facebook and also YouTube, and if you want me to answer questions, probably I can do that also through my YouTube channel. But
Thank you very much. Before closing this fourth session of the New City Kumustahan, allow me to express my sincerest thanks to the people behind New City and its faithful supporters. First of all, our two Philippine delegates, Ding and Chun, for their encouragement, for their full support to New City. The New City Magazine editorial board, headed by the editor-in-chief, Jose Aranas. The New City Audio Magazine team, headed by Edward Ilustrismo Piastro. And of course, the New City staff. And our faithful supporters, Bangko Kabayan, APSE, Focolare Carpentry, NSJTC, Bukas Palad and Pagasa Foundations, Kalayaan Engineering, Catholic Book Center, and Consulus Philippines. And of course, to all our New City subscribers. And as mentioned by Father Andrew at the start of this program, we are still in the period of the annual New City campaign. And we wish to invite those who may wish to support New City. Please do not hesitate to contact New City office. And perhaps some of you may be interested in extending help at once. You may use the New City GCash. The number is 0906-290-9154. Again, 0906-290-9154. Or do a cash transfer to our Metrobank account, the Work of Mary for Men Inc., Work of Mary for Men Inc., New City Press, number 306-306-50-2175. Again, 306-306-50-2175. Okay, so those are for those who are interested to help New City. To all of you who are present in this fourth session, maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. And of course, our very own Father Andrew Recepcion, a big thank you for giving us this chance to be with you. Thank you all, and see you for the next session of New City Kumustahan. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat.
And God bless you all. No?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Father Andrew.
Thank you, Father Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Okay, ciao.
Father Andrew.
Ciao,
Thank you,
tutti.
Father.
Thank you, Rome.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Father.
Each one and all of you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
Father
Father.
Andrew.
And of course, thank you very much to Angelo Puertollano for allowing us to use his account. Thank you very much. Ciao
Thank you,
to all,
Inka.
and see you again for the next session, the 5th New City Kumustahan. Maraming salamat sa inyo.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.